My name is Rilla Cycli, and I am one of the 3 curators who worked on Beyond Binary. And this is the first time that I've had the chance to come to state since it was installed, and I'm just kind of gobsmacked by the work itself and just what it finally looks like to see this exhibition installed. Kevin, Sharon, and I have been working on this for, it feels like, all of my life, which is not true, but it's a project that predates COVID and quarantine, and to see it fully realized is just, every, curator's dream, of course, but also to have worked with this extraordinary pair of other, these 2 other curators that I've gotten to know, and these remarkable artists who have lent their time and thought and effort over almost three very, emotionally challenging years. So it's such a pleasure to see it installed. And just wanted to thank everyone for coming out today. This is the 3rd of 4 programming events that we have for Beyond Binary. The 4th and final is a drag queen storytelling hour, which is a week from today here in the gallery at 10 a.m. I'm so excited for that. That's going to be absolutely amazing. So if you get the chance to come out, please do. But today's program is going to be a wonderful conversation. It's 2 just extraordinary people. So Asri, I knew I was going to do this. Wulandari. Sorry. Asri Wulandari and Dr. Kathy Zarur. I'll just run quickly through their bios. Asri Wulandari is a Bay Area-based visual artist. As an artist at the intersection of multiple identities, including refugee, queer, and trans Muslim of color, Asri's work embraces the internal and external forces that can create and transform and undo identity. Asri's works in a wide range of media, including video, performance, and digital images. In many of their works, quotidian materials such as hair, makeup, burqas, and flowers unfold into rich references to continual transformation. And that is a beautiful description. I'm so glad you shared that with us. And then Dr. Kathy Zarur is Associate Professor of Art History at Skyline College here in San Francisco. Her curatorial work has been featured at the San Francisco Arts Commission, Museum of the African Diaspora, Minnesota Street Project, San Francisco State University in this gallery, Kearney Street Workshop, and the Asia Pacific Islander Cultural Center. She has produced conferences about art history and pedagogy with San Francisco State University, the DeYoung Museum, and the Asian Art Museum. And if I may say so myself, she's one of my favorite curatorial collaborators in the whole world. And they are here today to speak about, of course, Asri's work and many of the topics that are brought up because of it. So thank you both for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you, Rilla. Yes, Rilla and I collaborated on an exhibition, and it was great. So I really appreciate our continued life together, and I just wanted to thank you all, Sharon and Rilla, and I know Kevin is not here. San Francisco State is an important part of my life. I went here, I dropped out of here, I went back here, I graduated from here, and then I taught here, and then I quit here, and now I'm here. So it's like I've done all the things. I love this school, and I love the students, and I can really relate being a Bay Area native to you all. And so I'm emotional sometimes, and today is one of those days. So if something comes up and I cry, it's just...
No, that's the goal.
Okay,
to
good.
get you to tear up. Yeah.
I'm really feeling your work, Asri. So thank you so much, Asri, for just your incredible dedication to your practice and for sharing it with us. So I hope that you all have had the chance to look at Asri's work, which is right on the other side of that wall. But if you haven't, could you just talk a little bit, just like a little intro to the project?
Yeah, for sure. But first of all, also credit where credit is due. Shouts out to Kevin, Rula, and Sharon. Y'all are amazing. Thank you for putting me on. It's super amazing to be part of this show. And yeah, it's like my first big girl gig. I'm like, whoa, yeah. But yeah, so the project itself is called Wayang Kulit oleh Seorang Bencong, and it's made out of laser cut plexiglass. They are shadowless shadow puppet, clear acrylic shadow puppet using imageries and form borrowed from traditional characters of Indonesian shadow puppetry, but modified and reimagined. That's the brief way, or like an overview of it for sure.
That sounds great. I'm going to try to say it too. So can you translate the title Wayang Kulit oleh Seorang Bengkong?
Oh, that's good.
Thank
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah. So Wayang Kulit oleh Seorang Bencong. Wayang Kulit is shadow puppet. Oleh Seorang Bencong is by a sissy or by a F slur. And it's intentional to put that title in there for sure. Yeah, I think it speaks for itself. I think it's very
Yeah.
literal. Yeah.
I love that, sissy. I haven't heard that word in a long time,
My
actually.
favorite word.
It's a good word. So, why did you decide not to translate it into English, or even to include an English translation for those who might not speak or understand Indonesian?
Yeah, I think I wanted to kind of, well, first of all, reclaim that word, bencong, because that was, a name I was called all my life growing up. And I wanted to kind of reclaim it and a way to empower the work and also kind of intertwine it into the main themes of the work, which I'm sure we're gonna dig into today. And also just introduce people to like Indonesian like language, right? Because I feel like you don't see it anywhere really. And so I think like as a living embodiment of Indonesian transcestors, as I want to say, I kind of want to like put it out there,
I love it. I think sometimes we feel as a curator, as artists, we feel a lot of responsibility and pressure to make everything knowable and transparent and apparent in our art so that we can reach as many people in the audience as we possibly can. But your decision to keep it in the original language really reminds us that the world is not only big, but there are so many other worlds.
Yeah. I think that is definitely something that I was intentional about in terms of like access points of the work. I want to make sure that I, make the work accessible for someone who's just passing by or someone who wants to take more time and sit with the work and learn more about the work. And so the title might not be accessible to most, but I think there are other ways that you can enjoy it without knowing much about it. And I was really intentional about that for sure.
Well, I also think that it's also a great way, because when we first met, we talked about how you don't really know many Indonesian people in the Bay Area, and I don't know if you know many Indonesian people in the art world, right? And so, that potential calling in of somebody who might not expect to see reference to their culture.
Yeah, exactly. And that has happened before with this work too. It was up, because this is a continually evolving work. It was, the genesis of it was in 2018, and it was much simpler back then. And I had it up in a gallery in Berkeley during my undergraduate as a young artist, and then an Indonesian person like sought me out after seeing the title and was like, "Oh, this is an Indonesian," and then we're still friends now. Actually, they helped me with this piece. They actually taught me Illustrator and helped me with this. I just kind of put two and two together. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
that little tiny story is a great example of how making art and making exhibitions, doing all the work that we do as culture workers and supporters, really is a beautiful way to build our communities.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Community-centered art.
Yeah. I love your nail applause. All right. So you grew up in Indonesia,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you come here?
I came here in 2015. I was 17 years old. I started out as a student exchange program under J1 visa. And I realized I didn't want to go back because I'm realizing that like I'm queer and I'm trans and I'm not safe back home. And one thing led to another. Now I'm a refugee under the pretense of like, LGBT, like, it's not safe to go back as an LGBT person, applied for asylum. And actually this week I just received my confirmation from USCIS that my green card is approved. So yeah,
Congratulations.
it's been a journey.
That's a long journey.
It's been, a journey.
Wow. There's so much happening for you this week.
I know.
It's a lot. Well, you're handling it all very gracefully.
Thank you.
Okay, so when you were growing up in Indonesia, I mean, I know about this tradition because I've seen, examples of it in museums, and so. But is this something that's like a really big part of Indonesian culture, mainstream culture? Is it something that you grew up with?
Well, it's not something that I was like heavily involved in because the puppeteers, the shadow puppeteers, we call them dalang. The dalang sometimes, they're intergenerational, like has dedicated their whole life to be a puppeteer, to be a dalang. So it's like really, and we're really well respected in Indonesian cultures, in some Indonesian cultures. And so it's a very sacred role to be a dalang, and my family is definitely not that. Like my mom was a tax auditor and my dad worked in a bank. So it's very, I would say like I'm not directly involved, but it is part of mainstream culture. You see imageries of the same characters that my shadow puppets are based on, which is the Punokawan. You see them in everywhere. There's statues of it in certain cities. Growing up, there was a live action comedy show where people dressed up as the characters that these shadow puppets were based on, and they did like comedy on TV, and I watched it growing up. So it's definitely intertwined in Indonesian culture, although I'm not directly involved. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I hope it doesn't take us off track, but I'm
No, go
curious
ahead.
because you just said that the dalang, the puppeteers, that work is sacred.
Yeah.
But I find it also very interesting that it's a flexible enough tradition that it can become a comedy show also.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's highbrow and lowbrow, I guess, because the shadow puppetry is so ingrained in our cultural identity that to be a dalang is a very respected thing. But because it's so well known that that there's lots of spin-offs and adaptations of the original story of the Punokawan that I guess it's both are true at the same time, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. It gives me the impression that Indonesian culture maybe is it historically kind of used to taking forms and sort of adapting them and using them in different contexts? Would you say, I know that's sort of a general statement.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true of any culture too, right? Because culture is so malleable and adaptable. Mm-hmm. Like nowadays, everything is Korean in Indonesia. Like BTS is booming there, Wow. And that wasn't the case 5 years ago too. Yeah, so it's like, it's just so malleable and adaptable, and I feel like it changes every day.
Pretty cool. Thank you. Okay, so regarding this tradition, so I see that it was, it's part of mainstream culture, and it was, in popular culture and both in sacred ways as well as, television stuff. But what about this tradition made you want to incorporate it into your work, or why did you choose to do a project with this tradition?
Yeah, I think my original intent with this work was to kind of create a modification of a traditional form of my culture as a form of protest, to the rigidity of culture itself, I guess. And that's reflected too in the form and the materials that were chosen, which I'm sure we'll get into later, right? And so, I just kind of wanted to take my culture, trace it back to its roots, and then saying a big FU to it, because in the framework of my culture, I don't really fit into that, because trans Indonesian women specifically, but also trans Indonesian people have been erased from culture. I'm definitely not the first trans Indonesian person, but you don't really ever see recollection or written historicals about us. And so, in a way, through the title also, Wayang Kulit Oleh Seorang Bencong, Shadow Puppet Made by a Sissy, is kind of an oxymoron in of itself, because Benchongs don't get to make shadow puppets, right? And here I am as a living, breathing Benchong, making it, and making my own version of it, because I don't think there's ever, or at least I haven't seen a dalang who's Benchong, so I would love to see one. Maybe I can be one, I don't know.
Well, I think I'm looking at one.
Oh, well.
This is so nice. So thank you for that, and thank you for your courage, because I think it takes a lot of courage to be a Benchong who is also a dalang.
Yeah. Oh, wait, that's my new title now. I want to put that in my resume.
Cool. Okay, so now let's talk about the project specifically. So I'm interested to know what changes you've made to the tradition and what you've maintained. And the first I want to ask you about material, because you've talked, that they are transparent, it's acrylic, they're shadow puppets that don't cast shadows. So can you talk a bit about the material and why you chose transparent acrylic?
Yeah, for sure. So the materials that I've chosen, clear acrylic, at its core renders the shadow puppets shadowless and therefore useless, right? And instead, instead of casting shadows, they actually reflect light. And so by taking away its usage, but keeping the traditional form of the characters, going back to what I said earlier, kind of saying a big FU to culture. That was the intention anyway. And then also, I through making it transparent, wanted to explore this idea I have about the hyper-visibilization and invisibilization of trans Indonesian people. And what I mean by that is we are marginalized by society, right? Indonesian people have a hard time getting jobs, getting education, even as simple as identity documents. It's really hard for trans Indonesian people to have identity documents that reflect our chosen name and gender, right? And through that kind of marginalization and erasure, we have become invisibilized by society. But at the same time, because we are a walking contradiction of gender binary, of cis heteropatriarchy, that every room we go to, we are hyper visible. We are the first person that you will see, because people don't understand us, and therefore, catch attention. We catch attention. And so through the hypervisibilization and invisibilization, we become very fragile and subject to discrimination, violence, and the project, through making it invisible and clear and transparent, kind of shines light into that marginalization of trans people, or at least my experience being marginalized as a trans person. And another aspect of acrylic being rigid and stiff and fragile is a very far from what shadow puppets are traditionally are. They are light, they are portable, you know, that you can stack them. The dalangs usually, you know, bash them against each other to symbolize a fighting scene, or, you know, just, you know, basically you can swing them around and they'll be fine because they're thin and they're durable. And my shadow puppets are not that at all. You can't really even touch them, really, or else they would break. And there's been many breaks when I was making them, for sure. And so, yeah, through that, shining light on invisibilization and hypervisibilization, but also how fragile we are because of that marginalization and invisibilization, and how rigid the binaries that we are marginalized by are, right? So that was the intent of the material itself.
I mean, visually, it's so captivating, right? From the lighting, and I know that they're not supposed to cast shadows, but it was weird. I was trying to capture images, and when I was looking at them with not through my phone, just with my eyes, I didn't really see shadows. But then somehow something about my camera caught the shadow, like the edge of it. So it was weird. I was like, oh, that's very interesting how that is. And then also the color of the light, you know, there's something very ethereal, anti-form, and yet the presence is very palpable.
Right. Yeah, for sure. A little anecdote about the piece that I think kind of piggybacks on what you said was I took a picture of the piece and sent it to my dad, and he was like, he knew immediately that it was like shadow puppets, but he also said, oh, there are shadow puppets, but why can't I see anything? And that's when I know my work is done.
Yeah.
Because my dad has done exactly what I wanted.
Oh, your dad sounds cool.
He's all right.
Yeah. No, he's great. In case he sees this. I also want to say, you know, when you were talking about how trans people are fragile, you know, I think because, you know, when we go out into the world, you know, everybody, if in particular, if you're someone who is subjected to violence and subjected to oppression, then you have to put on a strong face. You know, you have to walk through the world as though, you know, whatever insults fall off your back, you're not impacted. You know, you have to be really careful about your boundaries and how to keep yourself safe. And we don't really get to talk about the fragility, right? We don't get to talk about, actually, this hurts. Yeah. I'm tired.
Yeah, exactly. And like the rhetoric of, you know, trans people being perseverant, I'm, to be honest, quite tired of it, because I'm just tired as a trans person, you know? It's exhausting. Having to be hyper aware of your surrounding and my safety. And my day job, I am a finance coordinator at TGIJP, which is Transgender, Gender Variant, and Intersex Justice Project. I see like homeless trans folks come into our door every day, and I see how much they have to go through, you know? I'm lucky enough to have privileges where I don't have to be homeless as a trans person, but and able to like help my community. But yeah, I see that fragility quite daily, and it's heartbreaking, really.
Yeah, it is. And I hope that, you know, there's some really great efforts being put forth, and I hope that they're sincere. You know, I'm thinking about the Tenderloin as a trans district, and, you know, also kind of rewriting the history of resistance, as starting with a trans woman at what was the name of that cafe? I should know this.
Yeah. Compton's
Yes.
cafeteria.
Compton Cafeteria,
Yeah.
right. That
Yeah.
was where, like a really powerful act of resistance
Yeah.
took place there. And so, yeah.
Yeah, San Francisco is it's important. This is like ground zero next to New York when it comes to trans rights. We have the first ever transgender district in the whole country, in the whole world. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, but at the same time, like you still see houseless trans folks, not being given the resources they need to survive. But, sorry, that was a tangent. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I think we can go on tangents. We've been talking for about half an hour.
Oh, crap. Okay.
No, it's good.
It's good. Okay.
It
okay.
went by so fast.
I know.
But okay, so I do now want to ask you about another a change, or how did you say it when you were first? It was in your bio: transform and undo identity. I thought that was really interesting, and I feel like that's maybe related to my next question. So, what changes have you made to the characters in the traditional shadow puppetry, as well as the plot line,
Right.
and what have you maintained?
Yeah. I think this is what I'm most excited about to talk about.
Sorry, we just waited so long.
Oh, no. Okay, so the original characters are called the Punokawan, which they are usually comedic relief in traditional Indonesian shadow puppetry. They're the jesters usually, and consist of 4 main characters, which was Bagong, which is like the father figure, and the 3 like adopted sons, or his like goons, I guess. I don't know, which are Petruk. What am I forgetting? Bagong, Petruk, Gareng, and one other person. Oh crap!
I might have it written down, actually.
Gareng, Petruk, Bagong, and I think it's somebody. Well, you'll see it in the thing. I forgot. But yeah, they're like traditionally masculine characters. Petruk is a mighty warrior. Gareng is clever and nimble. Bagong is wise and nurturing. And so they're comedic relief jesters that I've kind of modified because I'm like, because I'm a benchong creating shadow puppets, I don't have to adhere to traditional forms of shadow puppetry, traditional storyline of shadow puppetry. I can reimagine it however I want, because you don't really see benchongs creating shadow puppets, right? And so I reimagined them as trans women, basically, and I reimagined the Punokawan as a house, like in the ballroom scene, a house, the name of the house is Punokawanita. So it's a play on the word Juanita, which is women, and Punokawan is their original name. So it's like Punokawanita, and I reimagined them with boobs, with heels, with hair, with nails, because I want to yassify them. I want to make them fabulous because this is like a benchong creating it. And I want to make sure y'all know a benchong made these characters and made the storyline. And the storyline itself was them, not having access to FFS, not having access to hormones, and they wish upon this Kalpataru tree, which in Hindu lores and also in shadow puppets lores of Indonesian shadow puppet lores are prosperous tree that grants wishes. And the Kalpataru trees, they were praying to the Kalpataru tree, and Dewi Sri, which is the goddess of rice, which can have the power in the traditional lore to grant prosperity to those who worship her through food, right, through rice, which is the main food of Indonesians, grants them the gift of womanhood, grants them the gift of wisdoms of the ancestors for Bagong, and beauty in movement for Gareng. And I imagine her as as a sickening, fierce, Vogue specialist of the house, and Petruk gets the gift of like, perseverance or something. I don't know. I forgot what I wrote. Sorry.
But there's text.
There's text, yeah. So yeah, I think it's really fun creating those stories actually, because I get to like reimagine my own cultures and kind of do whatever I want, which is so fun.
Is this a diaspora project? Like, could this project have happened if you stayed in Indonesia? Or could you have imagined it?
I think I could make it. I don't know if anyone want to show it.
Yeah.
Because, it's kind of disrespectful. Like, the tone of it is disrespectful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, and I say disrespectful to people who are rigid about, like, traditional culture. Like, right? If I show this to an actual Dalang back home, he might be offended. And I say he because there's only men, right? So, yeah, and so I think, maybe the newer generation of Indonesians could definitely accept this, but yeah, if I showed it to my dad and really tell him about like how I yassified the characters, he might be like, what? So.
But at the same time, I'm a diaspora person, and I have found that aspects of my culture in the diaspora have kind of stayed frozen in time in ways that my culture back in Palestine has long ago, they let go of it. So I just kind of want to sort of riff on this notion. It's sort of like, maybe it's sort of an undergirding assumption of my question that in the diaspora, culture can and will transform and people will be open to it. I don't think that that's actually true. Yeah, so it's, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, it's good that you're challenging that belief of mine, because I haven't been home in so many years because I can't, right? Because I'm a refugee and I'm trans. And so maybe now that if I go home, I would be surprised too, right? Of how different it is from when I was living there and grew up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a very valid point in that, like, basically, like, I should give credits to Indonesian trans women who are there now and living, breathing, creating, and I'm sure there's a few Indonesian trans women artists that I follow that create work that explore similar topics and she is able to like show her work in all over Indonesia and around the world. So I'm sure that if I take this work back home, there's an audience for it for sure.
You think there would be?
I think so.
Oh.
But, I don't know. I haven't been home in so long, so.
Yeah, in 2015 you said? Yeah, 22 years. Okay, so my last question is about the past and the future, and I'm curious in terms of your practice, not like a big picture thing. So I'm wondering what this project has in common with things that you've done before, and also, like, what has this project taught you that you think will contribute to your future practice?
Yeah, I think in terms of this project's relation to my past work, I explore a lot of topics surrounding like Muslim attire and, playing around with performance pieces using the burqas, the hijabs, the niqabs. And in those works, I try to kind of reflect on my own experience putting on a hijab and a niqab and a burqa and as a trans person, right? Because I don't dress like that day to day, obviously. But when I'm performing in those pieces, I try to see how I feel and how it feels like to wear those attires as a trans woman. And I find that actually, my transness, as more fabric is put on to my body, my transness becomes more and more concealed, right? And therefore, kind of taking away the subjugation of my body to transphobia, because my transness is not visible anymore, but instead, exposes me to other forms of isms like xenophobia or Islamophobia, right? And so through that, I find like a little bit of liberation being able to step into someone else's shoes and being able to reimagine my life as someone who might not share exactly the same background as me, but still, have a shared understanding and values. And so through that, I find this kind of like concept of concealment as a means of liberation, right? And so I, through this work, through the invisibilization and hypervisibilization of transphobia and explorations of those topics, try to re-explore that idea that's been prevalent in most of my work in the past, through making it invisible as a form of concealment, right? Making the shadow puppets transparent as a form of concealment in order to reimagine a utopian world where trans people thrive, where trans Indonesian women thrive, right? I know that's like a very big concept, but like that's like in my head what was happening when I was like creating this work. So yeah, that's contextually like what happens in the past. And in the future, I think I definitely see myself moving on with this work as like conjuring more of my transcestors, conjuring more images of like Indonesian trans women who has been erased out of history, maybe through drawings, through performance, through videos, through photography, just more ways that I could like create images of like Indonesian transcestors that little to no history of them exists. So yeah, and this is like, I think like the stepping stone of that for sure.
Great. And I think it's important to dream big. I don't think it's that big to ask for equality and to ask for trans prosperity and happiness. So I support that all the way, and thank you so much, Asri. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Do we have time for questions? Do you want a mic?
Thank you. That was on? Okay. I'm going to look more carefully at your work now because you spoke about it. But one thing that I'm really fascinated by is the reimagining these very old traditions. And I have a friend who's a visual artist. I think you know Mokhtar Paki. He's Iranian, and he's taken the figure of the div, which is the figure that's in the Shahnameh, which is the national epic. And the div is usually the one who's the troublemaker. He's like got horns, has polka dotted skin. They're shapeshifters. And he explains how as a child he would hear these stories and he would identify with the bad character, the marginal character, the character who was sort of suspect. And I wonder if you could say anything about in the shadow puppet tradition, if there's some characters like that that are sort of baddies that you identify with.
The badasses of the shadow puppets. Yeah, there's lots of villainous characters in the shadow puppets that I'm pulling a blank right now. But in terms of the Punokawan themselves, I think I was really drawn to them as a kid for some reason because they're so ridiculous and silly and goofy. Even like, in the traditional forms of the Punokawan, the characters are depicted with like big belly and like one tooth that sticks out. Patrick has one tooth that sticks out. And then Gareng has a big forehead. And like Bagong has like a really large belly that's like disproportionate to the rest of his body. And so I just find that really ridiculous. And I was really drawn to them for some reason. I still don't know why I'm drawn to them. Like if you ask me why did I choose the Punokawan to like revise in my own version, I really don't know. I was just really drawn to them. I guess I see a bit of myself in them because I don't know. I think I don't really take myself seriously, and here's like this very serious, like, shadow puppets that are not very serious looking, So I think that's a really good question. I was like taken back to my childhood of seeing them on TV, and I'm like, oh, I love them,
Yeah, my friend says, he was drawn to them as a queer man, but he didn't know he was queer. But now as an out Iranian man, he paints them and celebrates these kind of marginal, troublemakers, right? Because they're the queer folks in the tradition.
I think that's exactly it. Yeah, we got somewhere. We went somewhere there.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for the great question, Persis. Any other questions?
I'm wondering about the the plays and the theater aspect of it, because it feels like when the puppets are on display, like they're in this kind of neutral zone, like they're waiting to be animated. They're waiting to enter the literature or enter into the plays, the music, all of that. And I don't know if that's in terms of imagining them, are there stories being reimagined as well? The playing of the stories.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely something that I want to work on in terms of the continuation of this piece. Is like, how can I maintain transparency and rigidity, but how can I activate the piece through a performance of some sort without like risk of them breaking or... Right, because it's so fragile. But I kind of want to preserve that fragility because it speaks a lot to what it's trying to say. So I'm still finding that delicate balance between the two, but check back with me in 5 years. We'll see.
I could even see like a camera on the figures, a video camera with the voice narrations that would be animating or something like that.
Yeah, that would be really cool. You just gave me some ideas. It's brewing now.
Or maybe even the plot line could be about they are fragile, they are rigid.
Yeah. But we'll workshop it.
Okay.
I'll send you some emails.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could do studio visit. Any other questions? No question is a bad one. Thank you.
Would you ever consider installing a piece like this in Indonesia?
My first answer was no, but after our conversation, now I'm reconsidering, But it would be really interesting to set that up in Indonesia because I can't physically go there because I'm, trying to be naturalized here. So it would be really interesting to kind of have a piece up that I can't see in person, and I think it's a really poetic thing, and a kind of like a wake-up call to like this idea of borders and stuff like that. So definitely, yeah, I think that would be really cool. So if any one of you watching in Indonesia, hit a girl up.
Asri, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks for all the love. We feel it.
We do.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
all.